And we're on the air with wire106 Season 3, Episode 8.
Moral midgetry. I
Moral
just like to say the
Midgetry.
title. Moral midgetry. This is like the weirdest title of all of them. Like all of them have been pretty straight. Like The Wire, The Pager, right? Safe Harbor. Like they've been these kind of like almost poetic, descriptive, and now it's like moral midgetry. It's like someone finally dropped the axe on titles. It's like enough. We need a title that's completely, you know, I don't know, descriptive of a problem. I don't know. Am I wrong? Did this seem
I'm
like the
one
weird?
of one of the characters said like this is moral midgetry in it. It was one of the police officers, so it's not like it's completely out of the blue.
It's not, Maggie. You're right.
Hmm.
But, and that's the kicker, right? You're right, but. Don't you love it when people say that to you?
Yeah.
You're right, but. It just seems different tone than all the other titles so far, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I don't think any of the rest of the titles have tied into what someone has said. It's only been like the quotes in the beginning.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too because usually the titles are like thematic and they go over the whole thing and I mean like what was the title for the first episode of this season? Remember that season 3? What was the title?
Time after time.
Time after time, right? And that's kind of linking back to what Bodie was saying and the ongoing problem. But it also, you could say that's a Cyndi Lauper song. And you know what I mean? Like, it has all these different kind of implications. Like, moral midgetry, like, you link it directly to the quote. And it's so laden within it in the kind of, the anger of that one cop that it seems like just a weird title to me. But maybe that's just my fixation. I'm hoping that Maggie will fight with me on this, but
I don't know. It was like several weeks ago, probably a month or two ago, that I did an assignment where I had to make a poem out of all the titles of Wire episodes. And it seems like it's moving towards a more poetic, abstract kind of titles that aren't, because I mean the first season was very cut and dry, like The Wire,
yeah.
old cases, new cases, like stuff like that. There was like the parts of their case, whereas now it's sort of like ideas or concepts or terms for things, and it is getting a bit loftier and a bit away from the concrete things.
See, that's a really interesting, that's just that transition is kind of what I was going at. It's like, it just seems like a different tone from what the titles were. They were usually descriptive, one word, or just a noun. And now they're like, safe harbor or time after time, but even moral midgetry, it's like, it's a statement on the state of the world. It's not just a description. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Yeah. I think that goes with sort of what we've been seeing happen over this series. Is the first season we were on the street with the drug dealers, and they had like, you follow the drugs, you get the drug dealers, you follow the money, and you get who knows what. And we've sort of been following the money and getting more into like the police department's workings and into political stuff. And so I think that's why the titles are sort of moving more towards ideas and like bigger picture things than just specific aspects.
Yeah. And it's interesting, the police department episode brings you into that world. It's just an entree. It's not where you stop. So, it's interesting.
Yes, and with the addition now of Amsterdam, we've got a complete flip of roles because drugs are legal. The cops are just kind of like the ones working the corners now. It's like a complete reverse of roles.
Yeah. And you have a whole community who don't have jobs anymore.
Yes.
Young, right? Like, there's a real big concern about like what are the hoppers going to do? And
Yes.
like it's like as if the world was literally turned upside down for many people.
Yes, I love how the development of Carver in this whole present like problem with Amsterdam, because you see a different side of him. He's no longer like the angry cop, because things are always going bad for them. It's like he sees somebody else getting shafted worse than they were, and so he's like, what about these kids? They need, education. They need, to be taken care of. And it's like he's totally flipped now to worrying about other people.
Yeah, I agree. The emergence of Carver is very cool.
Yes.
What is the epigraph of this one?
It was what crawl. Is it crawl, walk,
Crawl,
then
walk,
run?
and then run.
Uh-huh.
That is awesome. Spoken by none other than Senator.
Yes.
What a character. He's coming into his own now. He's really starting to show that he's, Stringer and Barksdale and all of those gangsters have nothing on Clay Davis.
Yes.
He is the man.
Yeah.
Now, Stringer, baby, I just love the way he talks and describes it. He's awesome. Yeah, we'll come back to this, and we'll see where this kind of fits into the episode in several ways. But I'm actually going to start, and this is the only thing I have to share. But, well, maybe actually before I share this, what's the opening sequence in this one? Is this when Jimmy gets the call from D'Agostino, and then he goes to meet her in the hotel?
No, that's later on.
No. This one opens with the dealers getting robbed.
Oh, that's
And then he was like, I want to make a police report.
Yeah, and they're duct taped, and they're like crawling out of the steps.
Uh-huh.
And they go to do. They have the computer program later on where they're
Yes.
Yeah.
That, out of all of the statements that they've said, I almost fell out laughing on the floor when he said, "You got one of any D's for asses?" I about fell out of the floor laughing.
I loved also how they like described appearances. Like they said, like make her eyes more Chinese, like Beyonce.
Yeah.
Just like the comparisons and just like the language and terms they use for describing people is really interesting. And I also just loved how that one guy from the streets was like a wizard at the program, and Herc is like, you know how to work this, and they like get all into it.
That's right. And Herc's like, hey, look at these knuckleheads. They know how to use this, right? Like, I love that. Again, and the technology creeping in weird ways, which I really love. And speaking of that, here's another moment. So this is in episode 8. And this is when they're actually tracking the track phones. And they're making headway on that. And I figured I'd share this one because this one's near and dear, I think, to the wire106 class, and I think you're going to find out why in a second.
Still, they're worried about catching the wiretap. Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean someone's not out to get you, right?
It'd be nice to know who's buying all those cell phones.
Okay, so
I'll drive.
that's actually not the scene. I thought it was the scene because it was set up exactly like the other one.
Is it the scene with Prez when he's messing with their heads?
Numbers in the phones.
No, it's the scene when they're all there. Damn it. I'm really screwing this thing up. Anyway, it's the scene when they're all there, and they said they go all the way to Fredericksburg?
I know.
Yes.
And they said Fredericksburg. And I was like, this is awesome. And it's like Fredericksburg is the very limits of the Wire universe, but we're in it.
Yes.
Beautiful. I thought, like, hey, we got a shout out in the Wire.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have that scene, Paul? You do.
Yeah.
Oh, you're the best. Key? Fredericksburg?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll find it and I'll look while you guys are talking about different scenes.
I think it wasn't that scene. You might have been just before that.
Damn, I thought I had it. Okay, so go on. I'll shut up for once.
I like one of those other scenes where they're all sitting there at the table, and Prez is kind of like, if only someone had the technology where we could get a better view of the back of this car, and they were all just looking at the computer like, yeah, if we only had that. And then he goes, ha, and he does it, and they're all just like amazed.
Yeah, he was just like Prez was being a goofball and having
Yeah.
fun with that. I love that.
Yeah, and I love how Daniel said, sometimes you still scare me.
Exactly. Which is a little bit of foreshadowing, I think, for what's to come. So, yeah. Okay, let me see if I have it. This might be it. We'll see. If it's not, I'll stop with this nonsense. I just think it's such a great moment in The Wire. And when I was watching this, I was actually on my way to Fredericksburg, so I was like, oh my God, this place must be awesome. Okay, so here it is.
Fredericksburg. You going all that way to buy cell phone? One here, two there.
You go all that way to buy a cell phone, all the way to Fredericksburg, Virginia, in The Wire. This is a monumental moment. You know, we've been watching this whole series to get to this point where, you know, Griggs says Fredericksburg. Nobody says you go all the way there to buy cell phones. And then President, yeah, you know, one or two here, another there. On the edge of forever of The Wire is where we find ourselves. And I think it's beautiful. So great. Okay, we can go home. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, I have a shot that I pulled, so let me bring this up. And this was Colvin's talking to the deacon, or the deacon's talking to him about what he's doing in Amsterdam. But I love that image of the boxing gloves in the background, you know. Like, Colvin's thinking about hanging up the gloves. He's going to retire. He's going to put it down. But another thing we got going on is Cuddy trying to start his boxing gym. And, you know, later on in the series, the deacon sort of negotiates a meeting between these two. So there's like this foreshadowing thing that's going on there as well.
Well, I mean, boxing is like popped up in many places. Isn't that in the first season? Didn't they go to a boxing place to find, who was it? Avon?
Yeah, because Avon did Golden Gloves.
Yeah, so I think it's like something that just is like a reoccurring thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it almost seems old gold. It's like, where are the UFC places? Like, what's with all this boxing? Like, boxing itself almost seems out of time. And it's a classic trope of, like, you know, the inner city kids who find themselves in a program in a gym. They take them in, they train them. You see people like Mike Tyson, who comes out of that. You know, many of the famous boxers. But even that world of the boxing has gone the way of many of the institutions in The Wire. You know, it's fallen apart. It's become completely corrupt and completely removed from some of those roots it had. So it's interesting that boxing would be a kind of symbol for anything, given how corrupt it's become over the last decade or two. So it's funny that it's almost, that's a nostalgic reference. It has no real referent in the real world anymore.
All right. Do we want to bring up? I'm really excited. I haven't gone on to 9 yet. I'm going to watch 9 later. But my jaw hit the ground at the end of 8 because it's kind of building up with McNulty meeting with Dee's mom and talking about that, you know, it's becoming more obvious to her that he was murdered, that he did not commit suicide. And so it's kind of, I loved how he said that he was looking for someone who cared about the kid. And he was like, you know, all you did was make sure he served the time. You didn't really care. I'm just looking for someone who cares. And so it's kind of, you know, and he was like, I kind of like the kid. And so he's kind of like playing the guilt trip on her and opening her eyes at the same time that somebody in your group murdered him. And then, later in the whole episode at the end, Stringer, who's trying to disassociate himself completely from gangster life, is kind of like, I'm now, the white collar part of this whole organization, says, I had him killed to Avon, and then is like laying on top of Avon on the floor, and I'm just like, oh, you are so biting the bullet. Yeah, I don't know what episode, but you are so going to bite the bullet.
I love that you brought up the scene with D'Angelo's mom, because it's an interesting part in that scene that really struck me. Is it's being referred to a couple of times throughout the episode, like, hey, she contacted me, she wants to talk to me. He's like, he'd even forgotten about it.
Uh-huh.
Where he was kind of like blasé about it. But he gets in the room with her, and he puts on his detective mask, or whatever you want to call it, persona, and he is awesome.
Uh-huh.
Every punch, talk about boxing, like going after her in every different regard, hitting all the spots where he knows she's vulnerable, like catching up on the history that she wants to erase. I mean, it was a magical moment of police work, and then he's out. You know what I mean? Like, it was just amazing. And he was like nothing to him leading up to it. And he's like, I gotta go see her. It's like it was nothing. But it was just this amazing performance on his part as a character in terms of being McNulty, not in terms of being Dominic West playing McNulty. It was just a brilliant little look into the life of a detective and the kind of personas they might have to put on.
Yes, because you kind of see how sometimes his life is kind of spun out of control, but even though he's kind of spun out of control in his personal life, there are aspects of his job where he just snaps and he's it. And it's like, and when he snaps, he pulls it all together and gets right to the bottom of it, and then he's back off again on his own, like, chaotic worlds.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, totally great moment.
Yes.
I've actually got a screenshot from that. I can get it open.
Yeah, I was even surprised that she managed to have a tear when she was sitting there talking to him.
Well, you could see her slowly breaking down as he was saying these things. It's like you were watching her, crumble underneath the truth of it. You know what I mean? And it's weird because truth comes in a lot of different variations, and there's no one absolute. This one comes in the truth of him being a detective and knowing she basically pushed him to pull back his confession and take 20 years. And so he's just pushing on that as hard as he can. And, he has his own agenda, but it works.
Yes, and getting her to flip the switch from being kind of like one of the control figures in the Barksdale family that's trying to run the whole game, from leaving that to actually becoming what she is, Dee's mom.
Yeah, that's right. So let's see that screenshot, Ian. I'd love to see it.
I thought I had it, but I mistook it. I have the screenshot at the end after Stringer confronts Avon. And I like this week is centered on video, so it's like a combination of like the visual and the audio. And from the visual standpoint here, you can see the window panes like dividing them, like almost showing that there's something there between them now that's never going to go away. Things aren't ever going to go back to the way they were before. And I couldn't capture the audio part of it, but it like the sound muffled as it shifted outside the window, and I really liked how they combined together to show that this is it's kind of a bad place between them now.
It's a beautiful shot. And it's actually a beautiful demonstration of actually one of the things to think about with photography and video, the law of thirds, right? You have something in this one side on the left, and then you have Barksdale placed cleanly on the other third where you immediately look. And so it's actually a meta moment where it's looking at the actual art of photography and video within the clip. I mean, it's just a brilliant shot to demonstrate what you need to be thinking about. And there's no two ways about it. The director of photography had that in mind. They could not, given how essential that is to photography for taking these. So it's just awesome.
Yes, and they're so divided because if you were to look at Stringer in that picture, you would think he's just some guy from, high rise and working a white collar job, that he has no affiliations with any gangs whatsoever. And then you look at Avon and he's dressed like a gangbanger. He's got like the white tank top that you always see on cops with the bright white tennis shoes, and you're just like, oh, he's totally gangster, and he's not. And you could just see a clear division in this whole like monarchy that's running their gang.
Yeah, the tension that's been building between them has been very kind of frightening in some moments. With just, I don't know, when Stringer gets serious and gets like violent, it's crazy because he's such a composed figure. And it has been really interesting to look at the scenes with Stringer and Avon and think of like the first season when you saw a lot of them standing side by side, and now you're seeing them in very opposing shots wearing opposite colors, and you can see like they have these very different opinions on how to run things, and it's clearly butting heads, and they had that little tussle on the ground, and it was, I don't know, it's getting intense.
Yes.
It is. And I think of the scene in the first season where, Stringer is feeding Avon basketballs. He's feeding him the ball, he goes up and he dunks it. Feeds him the ball, goes up and dunks it. And now that's not the relationship. Stringer is no longer number two. He's, they're vying for power, between the direction of where B&B goes.
Yeah, it's like two kings, and they've got to have a war to determine which king is going to win out.
It's true. And this reminds me of another scene. So let me say this for a second. It actually goes right off of where we were with the previous one. So they say to Fredericksburg, right?
Dumping phones every 2 weeks.
And then Freeman
Still, they're worried about
goes
catching
back.
wiretap.
Now listen to this.
Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean someone's not out to get you, right?
Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean someone's not out to get you. Which is such an interesting statement. Freeman kind of says it. It's almost like a throwaway. But this is exactly what Avon Barksdale's philosophy was, episode 5 and 6 of season 1, and it's why he was so good. It's why he was such a badass. And it's what Avon has forgotten in season 3, and it's what Marlowe knows. And so the rise to power of Marlowe is premised in some ways upon that notion of constantly second guessing, being completely paranoid, making sure Chris goes there ahead of time, and Snoop is there watching. They see the hint, they blow a shotgun into the car, right? And that's why Avon's all cut up. That very notion of paranoia and caution is what Marlowe has. It's not about him being more powerful, just smarter and more cautious. Avon's kind of weak right now. And Marlowe's right. And I just love that they link back to that paranoia moment. And it reminds me of everything Avon no longer has, which is an interesting kind of, I don't know if it's a lesson, but an interesting kind of small detail that The Wire doesn't miss, which I love.
And I even wonder myself if Stringer isn't feeding Marlowe information just to kind of set up Avon, because that would help him win out, him being the king and Avon getting killed off.
That's some sinister shit right there.
Yeah.
Suggested. If Stringer Bell gets a wind of that, I'd be careful, Melinda.
I know, and I think it built from the very moment when he went to see Avon in jail and he put his hand up to the window and Avon wouldn't match him. That's when it began to, we are on two different teams and it's going to be a war between the two of us.
Yeah, agreed.
Let's see if. Oh, and I like how Omar went to Amsterdam and was just like, "We ain't messing with this," and just left.
I do too. That was
I just love Omar anyway because he's such an out of control character that you really never know what he's going to pull next.
well. It goes to the whole notion of this episode, and it kind of pulls it together now for me. This idea of caution, why Omar's still alive,
Hmm.
why he's still the best, and also Stringer kind of loses that too. He loses his caution. He sees the faucet. He hears about the golden goose, and he wants to not walk or crawl. He wants to run, and he insists on it.
Uh-huh.
Mike Davis makes him pay, literally. So there's a theme going through some of that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay. And you can see Omar is kind of like a crawler because he's going to be extremely cautious and sneaking around, not knowing who could be waiting at the next corner.
And nothing comes for free.
Yes.
No, it's awesome.
Yeah, I think like controlled chaos is sort of what wins out in the end is like you know when to strike and you take the steps to like strike and strike well and like when you come at the king you best not miss type of thing and I think like we're seeing Avon and Stringer sort of they're coming at the king but they're missing or they're just doing a lot of sloppy stuff and putting themselves out there and not planning things out while we're seeing the typical shots of like Omar hanging out and checking places out before he makes any move and Marlowe his group is very cautious and it is like controlled chaos and having a plan and taking their time is really what helps them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I mean, and it does really get to Clay Davis's epigraph. Like, he's sucking, that's a plan. Like, he's on the take, and he's sucking him in so he can grab his money. Like, this isn't him making a partnership. He knows Stringer Bell is a drug dealer. And it goes back to the whole D'Angelo idea that you can't escape who you are. The whole Gatsby reading.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stringer's feeling like he can.
Uh-huh.
It's his fatal flaw. And
Yes.
Clay Davis is going to make him pay for it. He's a mean character, Clay Davis.
And he sort of like says it right to Stringer's face, just the way you're acting, you've got too much gangster in you. You can't do this.
Yeah, which is kind of shocking to Stringer because he thought that he was above that.
And he's using it. Like Clay Davis, again, is using that against, Stringer, so that Stringer comes back to him after being fuming and saying, if I can survive on the street, doing what I do, I'm ready to run. So he pushes it, and there's a certain amount of hubris. And that's when, I think that's, if I'm thinking right, that's when Clay Davis knows he has him. He knows that he can take him for anything he wants, and he does.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a really great dynamic because you don't know where Clay Davis sits, and that's part of the game. It's a different game, and Stringer is not cautious. He's not taking his time. He's not figuring it out. He sees this other example that the contractor points out to him of a guy who is just living in a one-room apartment or whatever, and now, is working on his third or fourth, super complex, and he's made it. The spigot was turned on for him, and he gets sucked in. It's great.
Yeah,
How many details.
He's going into a level of crime that he's not ready for. He's going into white-collar crime, and he's not set up for that. He'll be a loser in that.
Yeah, Stringer seems to be caught in like this purgatory between gangster and white collar, and he's a little bit above like gangster and like how Avon wants to play things, but he definitely just does not have everything together to do the white collar stuff.
And it makes him the perfect Gatsby, which is awesome. And I never thought about that before, but he's who D'Angelo's talking about. It's brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I like this one shot of the two of them going into some federal building to meet the goose that lays the golden egg, I guess. Um, but you have that like wonderful like golden doorway that he's leading him through. It's just like symbolic of the money. But you also know that's not gold; it's a false front, and that's kind of what Clay Davis is giving him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I remember inside there was like a red carpet through security and just sort
Yeah.
of a lot of like luxury, but it's very fake and it's sort of leading to things that aren't super luxurious or as beautiful as they look.
Yeah, and they never go through security. I mean, that kind of struck me. Like Clay Davis is walking up security and then circumnavigates it. And then they come and they walk over there, but there's never a process they come through. He comes back to him and he says, okay, you're good, you're in. And Stringer Bell's not challenging any of this. He's not thinking like Marlowe. Marlowe's like, okay, I had relations with this woman. She wants to meet me again. Is this odd to you, Chris? Check it out. And there's none of that going on for Barksdale or Stringer at this point. It's interesting.
Yeah. Because he's in a different court that he doesn't even know how to play this level of game.
Yeah.
Stringer seems too focused on, like, as he kept saying to Avon's, like, we're going to have money to our own names. We can sign all these titles to our own names. We don't have to hide it. He's like, he wants to be very openly wealthy, be able to, like, flash it and not hide it away like he's been used to. But he's getting too ahead of himself. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely agree that I think Stringer feels that he's made it just because he's a step above gangster, but he definitely hasn't, and he's way over his head.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's this is why Stringer is one of the most memorable characters of the whole series. It's such a great study in his, like you said, purgatory as a character and in his relationship to the game and to the political game and to the economic game. And he's trying to do it right. Like he's studying, he goes to school, he's pulling back from the violence. He's made a drug co-op, right? They need the local hotel. I mean, he followed all the rules. So it's a great, brilliant character.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to some of the other ideas that we've been looking at where, people do the best they can and hope to, get a job and earn money. And we saw that a lot on the docks, and then they just don't. They get shafted. And I think Stringer is seeing this where he's putting the effort in and is, like, doing everything that he should, but he's still not there yet.
Yeah, and I think the epigraph speaks to that. Like, he just wants to run. Like, he feels like he put in his time in the street, and like this is his. He deserves it. And I wonder if both him and Barksdale feel like there's a certain amount of, we deserve to be my corners, like they were his once he went to prison, or he got caught. He did stupid things. Like same with Stringer. Like there's a certain amount of entitlement to their positions right now. And with that seems to come a certain amount of comfort. And with that comes, obviously, a loss of a step somewhere. And it's interesting because Barksdale talks about it when he's sitting next to his kind of uncle. Remember that in season 2 or end of season 1 with D'Angelo? And he's like, one false move, or 1 second too late, one slip. And it's what we're seeing right now with both these characters. Right? They're both slipping just enough. And in the game they're playing, and it's critical. They're done.
Yeah, you saw in Cuddy how when he got out of jail, he's totally out of the game too.
Yeah. Well, Cuddy's like the other side of all this, isn't he?
Yeah. I really like the relationship that he's building with the deacon, and he's kind of like pulling him out of gangster and making him legit. Start working with kids in boxing.
Yeah, and the thing with Cuddy that I really like is his honesty. Like, he speaks as honest as Omar in some ways. Like, he doesn't lie. He tells people what he thinks. He's honest about what he knows and doesn't know. And he just becomes a really likable character because he's one of the few that will recognize his limitations but still wants to rise above them. So,
I know, and I think I feel loyal to him as a character because I love him on The Walking Dead.
right. A little synesthesia going on there between each of us. Okay, what else? Other ideas? Screenshots?
There's a scene we're talking about Cuddy, where he's scoping out the place where he wants to start this gym. And you can't see here in the episode over. And you see how much he has to do. He has to clean up his whole space and get ready for his own boxing areas. And unfortunately, I don't know if we're gonna actually see it, or if it's gonna be like one of those cuts, like, oh, it's already done. But he doesn't seem upset. It's just like, nah, I got this by myself. This is my thing. With the other criminals, they seem to kind of hate the idea of parlay, want quick, easy money. And so this way, this is what sets Cuddy apart from them. Besides his morals, that he's willing to do the hard work to earn an honest living, and make a good community.
Yeah, it's funny that you should say that, Ian, because I'm actually working on my bathroom right now, gutting it. And so when I saw that, I really did relate. Like, not that I have to, gut a gym, but just the labor involved and just like what that means. And it's daunting, and you want to step away from it. And I'm not pretending the two are identical, but I deeply related to Cuddy in that moment because he does actually have to do something. You know what I mean? And there's the challenge of that. And, it does obviously celebrate the working man in that way, right? Like, there's a certain amount of that. And it's interesting because season 2 didn't at all. Even though it was about the working class. And
yeah, you never saw anybody working.
It was not celebrating the worker at all. So it's an interesting, it's not like this season or this series falls into that, simple. It can't be accused of celebrating the working man at every turn, I guess.
Yeah. It definitely did not make a union look like a good thing to be a member of.
Exactly.
Well, I have one more screenshot here that I want to share. And this is when McNulty and Greggs go down to Virginia to the store where the kid's buying all the cell phones, and they're like spending the night in the hotel till they can get the tape the next day. But what we've been seeing over the course of this season, I think, is Greg's turning into McNulty a lot. Like she was questioning the boss's orders, engaging in infidelities, trouble at home. And in this one shot here, you see her like staring straight at the bottle there. And there's like a symbolism going there that I really liked. Like that's what McNulty is, the drunk, and like she's looking at that in her future.
Yeah, I like the hotel room itself because McNulty was like, oh, I don't mind this. Like, I've been to tons of motels like this. Like, this isn't that bad. I'm used to it. And I like how everything is sort of the same color. They're wearing clothes really similar. to the bedspread and the walls, and also just how Kima is framed in the shot. She's like, there's McNulty and the gun on the table and the bottle, and she's sort of like stuck in the middle between this and can't get out. And she's definitely been siding with McNulty a lot and doing a lot of work with him.
Yeah, and in this scene, he's so remorseless. You know, he gives her a whole way about doing it. Like, he had a whole system, and it worked with his implicating his partner, and it was a complicated web of lies. And you really detested McNulty at that moment when he was like laying out how she could do it. It's like, talk about running with the devil, right? Like, he was, and that was just like bad.
Yeah, the only thing we were missing was the dogs barking in the background.
Exactly. Well, speaking of that, I gotta get a twofer in terms of a video. Let's see if this plays. So this is going to be the scene of both. Well, the ending scene of the deacon playing pool. It will go out of that quick, and then the scene of Stringer Bell getting seduced by the golden egg, and then the tech thing with Prez. So here we go. Check it out. So Deacon plays some pool.
I got Comstat meeting.
And then he doesn't want to hear the truth.
By later on.
Right. Colvin's trying to go to him for some truth. Not happening. But here's great.
So we good with the permits?
Yeah, this week so far so good.
All right.
Oh, look at you.
Who?
Chunky Coates.
Who's that?
You don't know Chunky? He's got the properties down the block and over on the even side of Packer Street. When I first met that fat man, he had an office so small you had to leave the room to change your mind. And 2 years ago, he started running with your man, Clay Davis. Look at you now, you big...
It's like the little devil on your shoulder, right? Like, you can feel the seduction. It's just great.
Sassy bitch.
Is that better?
Mm-hmm. Hey, Special Agent Fitzhugh. That is, in fact, your real name.
FBI in on this?
Oh, I have only love for my toys. Lester called, and I delivered.
You got to say it?
Date of 10/10/04. 15:04 hours, 30 seconds. By the register tape. Mama Barksdale? D'Angelo's mother. She cold called McNulty about her son on the jailhouse hangout.
She's calling us on that week shit.
Is this, Rihanna? Right. Call about your son and return that message.
Uh-oh. Nothing there. It's so tiny. No mere mortal can... Oh. You see what he just did? What? He did it again. Who is this man? Where does he come from? Can anybody stop him? Please don't hurt us, please. My eyes. It's so big and clear and bright.
I'll be a homicide. Sometimes you still scare me, you know that?
And what I love about this scene is there are so many different things. And, you know, the producers talked about compressing scenes. They said in any given episode there's like 120 scenes. And they compress that or try and compress that down to like 90. And usually that means sitting down and saying, this scene could be there and there. How do we get them together? There's three things happening here. There's the Brianna call happening in the background, right? Mm-hmm. There's the video editing and the introduction to a new technology, which is great. And it's also great for this week because it's all him using a big Avid setup, right? Which is amazing because you can do anything that thing could do on your Mac now. It even could in about 2005, 2006. So this is still when Avid technology was like cutting edge video, but this is basically consumer level now, which is interesting. But you also have this conversation happening between Griggs and Daniels that gives you a sense of the whole notion of another vision of the Brianna thing and what that means and why it's so crazy that she's calling. And it's just remarkable how they put the scene together to do so many different things that just seem seamless. And this is the kind of art that happens in The Wire again and again. Watch television and watch how many shows do one thing in a shot. They maybe have a face up, they have a close up on the face, one person talking, or one person doing something. But rarely are they compressing several different moments into one scene, which I think is kind of the unspoken art of what they're doing here. They have so much to convey, and the art is to taking all of that and editing it down. And I think in my mind, if we're talking about video, that's the art of video, like audio. Taking all of what you've caught and found and editing it down to be as precise and communicate as much as possible. So I really love this scene to kind of get at what the challenges we'll have over the next 2 or 3 weeks dealing with video specifically, is how do you get at it and do many things at once through the art of editing. And it's not an easy thing, but you'll notice here, using sound, right? As Presbalewski is going in on the license plate, you hear McNulty talking to Brianna in a very matter-of-fact way, like I suggested earlier, like, hey, I want to talk to you about your son, you're interested, da-da-da-da-da, not getting you ready for the sledgehammer he's going to drop in another 10 minutes. But at the same time, these two things are overlapping in some really powerful ways of storytelling that a lot of times, we just take for granted. Like, oh, this is television, of course, that's how you have to tell a story. 99% of the shows on TV can't do this with any kind of acuity. Like, they have nothing to add to a complex relationship of editing. And it's one of the things that very subtly separates this. Getting 2 or 3 themes and plot lines rolled into one scene and doing it seamlessly is the art of this television show. And I just wanted to say that. Big fan.
Yeah, it's something that Simon is saying that they're really trusting the intelligence of the viewer, so they're putting so much in there. I think in a lot of regular TV, they really underestimate the intelligence of the viewer. It's like geared towards people who are 8 years old or whatever,
Yeah, or really don't want to think.
Yeah.
And I think that what Wire did is, and it wasn't, I don't think it was kind of arrogant about it. Because a lot of times, people can be arrogant about that and say, well, it should be complicated and you should work hard. And then people say, screw you. Why do you tell me what I should do? What they did do is they made it entertaining. And they had good writing and good artistry. And that was the difference. Not telling people they should watch their show because it's smarter or better. But it was actually executed more brilliantly. And it didn't resort to kind of an esoteric defense of why it's art. It just was awesome. And there's a lesson to that. Damn it. Okay. What else? Don't make me talk more.
One other thing that was just revealed in this episode for me was I finally had the aha moment to realize that Carcetti's campaign manager is the woman who's like completely taken over control of McNulty. And it was like I didn't even put, like earlier when we met her, I didn't even put 2 and 2 together that was the woman that's running the campaign for Carcetti. And then when I seen him in some of the political things, I'm like, oh, now I know. I did not even put earlier in the episodes, I don't remember if it was 7 or 6, or when they went to one of the dinners. And then he was, I think this was 7, he was spying on her at one of the other dinners. And then she said you were going to just stare at me across the room and leave and not say anything to me. And then I was like, oh, now I know who she is.
That's right, he goes to D.C. Yeah. And then he meets her at his son's a fundraiser for his son's school.
Yes, when he met her there, I never put two and two together. I always thought she was somebody affiliated with the school.
Yeah, yeah, it's the small world of The Wire, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. Any other last thoughts about season 3, episode 8? Moral midgetry.
Moral midgetry.
Moral midgetry. That's such a weird name.
Yeah.
Ian,
I think with all we've been able to talk about is that a lot happens, like on every front. Cuddy's boxing, degrading conditions in Amsterdam, Avon Barksdale and Stringer Marlowe getting the upper hand and almost killing Avon in a way. Like all these things are coming together. And I think it's just the pattern is going to be increasing activity until the end of the season, because you're nearing like the final quarter of it. So.
Yeah, we are 3/4 in, and the point you raise is a good one. In that there's going to be, there's going to be a resolution. Like this season's going to come to some sort of moment, some climax, and then denouement around it. That's how they've been going. And what those are is interesting. Like, you can start to feel it and see, you said it already, Melinda, it doesn't look like Stringer has got much time left because of, how he's playing his cards right now. And it's interesting because this is where we see the next couple episodes. And, I didn't realize it the first few times around, but I think season 3 is this time around my favorite because it's so beautifully sculpted as an allegory at the same time around Iraq. And how we understand that, like with the falling apart of Amsterdam, with those soldiers who are kind of coming home and rehabilitating, right? You can think of Cuddy as also a soldier coming back from Afghanistan or from Iraq and finding a way in the world and not being able to navigate it. Like, there's so many different allegories we can look to. Stringer and Avon are now the institution. They're now dealing with the Halliburtons. They're big money people, and they're getting comfortable and they're getting lazy. And the insurgents aren't. And they're hungry and they're mean and they're going to take back the power that's being taken away from them because that's the game. It's like, all of those allegorical elements now really start to map on beautifully. And like, this is a well-wrought urn of art, season 3. And I didn't realize that the first couple of times around as I am this. And the writers are they're killing it this season. The writing is awesome. So I'm just really enjoying it. And I'm just really, this time around with season 3, I don't think I realized the first couple of times just how good this season is, or at least it is for me this time. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, speaking of the writing, this is another Richard Price episode.
Which is interesting because we were bringing up D'Angelo, and he was in the D'Angelo one, right? He was the teacher. He acted as the teacher in the prison. So, yeah, there's a lot of Richard Wright in this season. Pelicanos, Dennis Lehane was in here. Ed Burns, really, great. All right, last words, Maggie?
I think you've said it all.
Big fan. Always liked you. I know that wasn't meant as a compliment, but I'll take it as one. Linda?
I liked in this episode the clarity of the line really being blurred, where you've got Herc laughing with the drug dealers on the make-a-face, And you've got Carver, who now has become the moral police. And what are we going to do to take care of these kids? And we need to get them a basketball goal. And you just see a complete flip of some of these characters that are, and even on the other parts of the episode, complete flip of, like, Stringer is no longer considering himself a gangster. And I mean, you've got all kinds of role reversals that are going on that's just like, whoa. And it really has flipped the switch, the show, kind of like you reference with Iraq. When you dethrone a powerful character that's taken, that's used to running with very strict guidelines, and you don't replace it with another strict guideline, things will just completely spin out of control, and you won't be able to bring it back together.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's cool. I mean, it's just cool also to see that. I always remark about this, and I promise I won't say anything else. Is we're 2.5 seasons into this show, and it's still keeping that consistency. It's one of the things I said about Boardwalk Empire. It kind of lost its way, and it's so easy for a series like this to lose its way. And the fact that it's just getting on its best game is remarkable, just from a series point of view.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I guess we're going to call Season 3, Episode 8, a wrap.
All right.
But not a wrap you can eat. This is video talk, people, because we're doing video this week. A wrap. That's a wrap. You feeling what I'm saying here? You picking up what I'm putting down? That's a wrap.
We're done.
We're done.
We need the big chop thing.
Exactly. Take us off live, Paul.
All right. Wire 106 for life.
Bye.